Welcome to the Running for Real podcast, where each week we bring you a conversation designed to help you create positive change in your life, community, and planet. It's a collective of conversations about running, the climate emergency, and social justice. Running for Real is for the brave, for those with courage and vulnerability. United by our love of running, we're driving momentum towards some of the really tough challenges we're facing as humanity. So come join me, Tina Muir, and let's get started. Hello, my friends. Welcome to this bonus episode of the Running for Real podcast. I am excited today because we have not only myself and my guest, but I have a co-host, which I think it might be the first time I've had a co-host. So Maria is here. Welcome to the show.
Hello, Tina. I'm so excited to be here. What an honor.
I know this is going to be fun. Yeah, I really think this might be the first time I've had a co-host. And so Maria Vargas is our communications lead here at Running for Real. She is the person who brought our guest to my attention today, and she is just the perfect person to bring on to help with this interview that's going to be a little bit different. It still ties into running, but I think it's going to help you grow in other areas of your life with running and beyond. So Maria, tell us, who are we having on the show today?
Sure. So we can have a little drum roll. But our guest today, is Chase Jarvis. And he's actually the founder of Creative Live, which is a creative online learning platform. And then he's also the author of a book called Creative Calling. So expert on creativity. And I think I first learned about Chase through Rich Roll's podcast. So that's also a really good episode if you need more background info on Chase. But yeah, we're really excited to have him.
Yeah. And I want to say, just before you click off saying I'm not a creative person, hang on. We're going to address that in the first few minutes of the interview here. So you're not allowed to leave until you at least listen to that part, because even though you may not label yourself as creative, this does still apply to you. So stay tuned. We're going to hear a quick message from one of our sponsors. I'll be right to the episode with Chase Jarvis. Thank you to Tracksmith for sponsoring this episode of the Running for Real podcast. I just love summer running in Tracksmith clothing. I actually was I had John Glazer, who's a comedian and an actor, on an Instagram live with me a few weeks ago. And I was asking him about Tracksmith. Have you tried it? And he said to me, no, I've seen it. I haven't tried it. And then he said, what is so special about this brand anyway? And as much as I could give him, tell him about the quality, tell him about how good it feels, tell him about the fact that I can wear things 2 days in a row and them not stink. At the end of the day, with Tracksmith, you just have to try it. You just have to wear it. I don't know anyone who has tried on their clothes and not absolutely loved them. I am such a big fan. They're constantly innovating, constantly changing things. And the colors are just beautiful. They've got some new colors out now in colors like straw, rosewood, there's spruce, mauve, and then there's the navy, black, and ivory that they often have. So I'm really loving the Twilight series. That's perfect for this time of year. It's really comfortable, it dries quickly, and it's lightweight, and it's just really good for summer running. And I like wearing it just on a day-to-day basis as well. One thing I love that I should mention, when you go to the Tracksmith website, you will see people running in their clothes, but you actually see like a sweat pile, or you might see like some drips coming off them, or you might see them with a slightly red face, because they film not models and they don't take pictures of models, but they take pictures of actual people actually running. So you know that these are comfortable, even beyond me saying it. You know that these are quality. And they're just awesome clothes. So some of my favorites are the session shorts. As I mentioned, I really like the Twilight series. I just like all of their tanks if you are a woman. But I also have got Steve quite a few things. And he has been testing out some of the session shorts, the longer ones. And those are really, I like those as someone who has been very picky and very particular about his shorts. He's not a short guy, but those session shorts are 7-inch, and if you want even longer ones, there are some Longfellow shorts which are also going to be great for running. But you can also wear them for day-to-day, like casual wear. Treksmith, you can go to treksmith.com and use code TINA15 for $15 off your order of $75 or more. Be sure to go check out their journal while you are there. They have some lookbooks, they have films, they have stories, all kinds of interesting stuff to read and learn. You can also learn about the programs that they are up to and how they are supporting people within various fields within the running world. Thank you to Treksmith for sponsoring this episode. Go to treksmith.com and use code TINA15 for $15 off your purchase of $75 or more. Chase, thank you so much for joining us today. That's weird saying us. Joining us today on the Running for Real podcast. I'm excited you're here.
Thank you for having me on the show. Really appreciate it. Love what you guys do.
So I haven't even told you actually, Chase, that Maria doesn't usually join me on the show. So we should welcome her in. She's doing this special interview today, her first interview, right?
Yay, thanks for being on the show. Can I welcome you to your own show? I don't know.
I love this. Thank you. What a warm welcome. This is my first interview. Oh, well, I couldn't be more excited to welcome you to the show. And Tina and I feel really lucky to have you. I think this is going to be a little bit of a different episode, really going more towards the creative side. So I'm excited to dive deep.
Well, there's an inherent, I think my background, if you read my bio or look me up on the internet, you'd probably find a lot of references to creativity and entrepreneurship. My background as a photographer, and I've started a lot of businesses, but one of my key points of identity is as an athlete, and the amount of connection between the muscles that we use as an athlete and the muscles that drive our creativity. And by creativity, I don't just mean creativity with a small c, like art and design and photography, but I mean creativity with a capital C, as in every day we are making choices to create our lives. So there's just an amazing similarity between the muscles that we cultivate as athletes and the ones that we do to design and create and fulfill our lives. So I'm excited to dive in.
That's so important to mention, I think, because I was talking to Maria before, and to our listeners, they may hear the word creativity, as you said, that you said it was lowercase c, right? That people tend to to think like, well, I can't draw.
Yeah, I'm not
a singer. Yes.
Like, I don't believe that for a second.
Okay, well, that's why I'm excited to learn more here, because I very much sometimes fall into that trap of feeling like creativity is something that I'm not. Even someone who hosts a podcast, which falls into that category.
But see, I want to interrupt you for a second, because if you start dissecting, you say, I'm not very creative. And you're like, wait a minute, I host a podcast. I've built a business. I enjoy cooking or barbecue, or, there's so many ways that creativity manifests. Right now, someone who is a skeptic might be saying, yeah, but what is it good for? The reality is the same muscles that we use to do all of those things, those are the muscles that we design and create this one precious thing that we have in this time of ours, which is our lives. And it's the same muscle, the muscle that decides, I want to, play music, or I want to make an amazing meal for my family or my friends, or build a cool business that helps, as socially, that's, got positive impact. That's the same muscles are the muscles that we use to create this one precious life. And I think that is something that it's hard for people to wrap their brains around. But if you just stick with me for the next few minutes here on the show, I will hope to convince and show you why this is true.
And I think it's interesting if we, undercover that layer of why we think creativity is separate from our work or separate than who we are. If it's part of our education growing up, right? It's like you would have art class and you would have sports, and then you would have math and the subjects that are less creative per se. But then creativity is like the brain power, right? It's so much energy that requires for us to use that part of our brain. And so it's really exercising it just like we would a physical exercise, right?
It's absolutely true. The same. I mean, if you were going to go run a 10K, you don't, or most people don't just go from zero to expect to run a successful 10K or a marathon, right? You're training every day. And for someone who thinks of themselves as not creative, it's because you were told at some point along your life that you weren't creative. And I'll tell you a little teeny story here. I remember the summer between first and second grade. I made my first film, and I went and washed cars to make enough money. I bought film. I, hired a cast, and I mean, we're talking like, small scale production here, but I made my first film. I went and bought candy bars and sold them at the concession and made a profit. And I was rolling into second grade just like on cloud nine, like I'd had a successful film, and I had a little magic show that I was doing, and I had this little stand-up comedy routine. And, the first 2 months of second grade, I had a cool teacher named Miss Kelly. Now, in the U.S. school system, there are these things called parent-teacher conferences, and they probably happen via Zoom nowadays. But back in the ancient times when I was in second grade, there was the ice cream social, and it was basically a way to get the families to the school, or the chaperone or whatever, the guardian, to get to school, and they would feed you ice cream while your parents had like 10 minutes to talk to the teacher about you. So I remember my mom in the room with Miss Kelly, and I was out grabbing ice cream, and I just was like stumbled into the room, and I did so just in time to hear my second grade teacher tell my mom that Chase is so much better at sports than he is at art. And as a kid who was rolling in there, like fired up about my stand-up comedy routine and my magic act and the film I just made. And, you might think that as a little kid that I may be crushed. But as little people, and let's be real, as adults, we're all just sort of a different shell of that little person we once were. Mm-hmm. We adapt. So we are social animals. So we want to fit in and we want to be accepted. And so what did I do? I didn't, cry in the corner that my second grade teacher didn't think of me as creative. I ran towards sports. So cue my next 20 years, I went to college on a soccer scholarship. I played for the U.S. Olympic development team. And if you think there's a lot of running, try running in soccer. And so that in part defined me. And it was only really the unlearning that I was not creative that allowed me to live, I think, certainly the life that I'm living. But what I would argue is my best life. This, the idea that I could create my future, and that I could, intentionally pursue things that mattered to me. And we're co-creating this conversation right now. For example, you're asking me questions, I'm responding, and you can take the question, you can take the show in a different direction just by asking a question. So if you think of creativity in that capital C sense, you'll start to understand two things. One, that we're constantly creating our lives. And two, that creativity, if you walk into any first grade classroom and you say, who wants to come up to the front of the room and draw me a picture? How many hands go up? Every hand. That's innate in children. Like, we want to express ourselves. And that is something through the school system and just through popular culture that's trained out of us. And so it was my goal to re-engage that part of myself and realize that it is arguably as important as, food or water to be able to create the life and living that we want for ourselves.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that. I love hearing that. And as the mother of two young girls, this is something I've been thinking about a lot, not even in terms of just them as individuals, but comparing, yep. Not being, this is the sporty one, this is the the creative one, this is yep. the, putting them into boxes. And then beyond that, just thinking about, we're obviously not going to ever, you said about the parent-teacher conferences, mm-hmm. there's still, I would imagine most schools are probably the same thing. Sally is good at this. Jimmy is good at this. So we're probably not going to change the system here.
Right.
So
we have to change elsewhere, right? That's like, we can't let the school system. And again, my wife is a teacher for many, many years, and many of my dear friends are teachers. And I invented an online learning platform mm-hmm. whose goal is to, teach tens of millions of people around the world about this stuff. But, aside from changing popular culture, where we do label one another, sometimes for better, oftentimes for worse, I think part of what is, I would implore the listeners to take up is the idea that when you're both programming not just your kids, but you're programming yourself all the time by saying you're not creative. You're limiting what's possible for your life. And I would consider that unhealthy behavior. And if you're worried about your kid, like, oh, I don't want my kid to be a starving artist. This idea of a starving artist is a myth. The most happy, productive, creative people that we know, those are the people largely that our culture looks up to and respects and admires. And this is not the poor art student that you read about, the world's top creators and entrepreneurs, the ones that are, putting us in places where we can solve the climate crisis or the world's access to clean drinking water, or take us to Mars, or invent technology that can transform lives. That's creativity. And it's so weird to say culturally that, oh, I don't want my kid to grow up to be creative because I'm worried about their welfare. When ironically, just think of the most celebrated people in our culture are ones who have transformed the culture largely through creating. And we use the word innovation, or have innovated. We throw that word around, but what is innovation if it's not creativity applied? So I just want to expand the definition, make it more inclusive, and help people understand that, again, if you enjoy running and you run, the more you run, the stronger you get. The same is true with identifying that you are creative and that you are in charge of this one precious life. Hopefully it's empowering.
Yeah. There's a beautiful line you have in your book, Creative Calling, and it said something like, "It's your world." And when I read that, I was like reminded of, we have this autonomy in our lives to design the life that we want. And I know that's something you talk about as well. It's the power that we have to choose how we intentionally design our lives, whether it's work or whether it's family. I think sometimes we lose sight of the fact that it's like, it's all within our control. We say, I have to go to work. It's like, you don't have to go to work. We choose to go to work. So, just the whole mindset around that. And I believe you both know Ryan Holiday, but he says something like success is autonomy, and the autonomy around crafting the life that you want, because it is your world. That's where creativity comes in, because that's where
I love it. I like that you're making those connections and willing to share them here on the show with your listeners. That means the world to me. And Ryan is a dear friend. We've been friends for more than a decade and love his work. And I couldn't agree more with the sentiment. And even if your autonomy directs you to spending time with others, whether you're introverted or extroverted, like that in itself is a choice. And it's important to remember that privilege is real, right? That I, for example, am born white and male in America and, in this time. And so while we have different access to resources and have different upbringings and different levels of preference, for example, that we, again, you are not responsible for whatever childhood trauma or whatever situation you were born into, but you are obliged and do have the opportunity to change it. And that fact that we all are in an abstract, but also in a very concrete sense in the driver's seat, and learning how to create the mindset that can create results, and cultivating a set of skills and, life skills and job skills and interpersonal skills that can cultivate the fulfillment that we all see, because we want to have a happy, joyful life, right? Those are all active activities, right? Those are, if you can choose to be the cork in the tide, or you can choose to create the environment. And as you look around to your left and to your right, and the people who are a little bit further along in the experience of life than you are, or within a particular discipline, those lives and of the people that you respect and admire, those are created. Those are intentionally cultivated to turn out the way they did. And it's not to say that we don't have happy accidents and good things and bad things happen. But generally speaking, if you like someone else, or you enjoy their personality, or the space that they're taking up in this world, or you're inspired by their activities, whether it's an author, a runner, an athlete, an entrepreneur, like the shit that they're doing is intentional. It's like, it's crafted. And I would invite the listener to say, are you doing Are you doing that same level of intentionality in your life? You could say that it's easy to decide to go for a run every day because that's something that you've decided to commit to. And that's why you love this show. You could do that same. You could take that same intention with, other things that could have a huge impact on your life. And that's why I wrote the book, because I think I want to expand the definition of creativity. And I want everyone to know that they are creative, and that the same muscles that you're deciding on what music to play or listen to or dinner or what direction you're going to run, those are the same muscles that we use to create our lives.
Yeah. And we don't have to have a game-changing idea, right? To be able to call fiction. Ourselves creative.
So you don't have to move to Paris. You don't need to smoke these cigarettes and wear the beret and, all those things. You don't need to get a new set of friends. Maybe you're an accountant. That's fine. The concept of creative accounting might, get some hems and haws from the crowd. But generally speaking, this idea that creativity is reserved for some of us, those are just comfortable, familiar, simple labels that people like Miss Kelly, our second grade teacher. And that's part of what, they bestow upon us. And that's in part what's confusing to us is I loved Miss Kelly. I thought she was awesome. And in the same way that you respect no matter your parent or your grandparent or your career counselor, we're programmed largely to think along some pretty simple societal lines. And the best stuff lies on the other side of those lines, and on the other side of fear, and on the other side of what our grandma thinks of our profession, or how much money we make, or what our friend circles are. And to me, that's where it gets interesting. That's where it's exciting, when you can have the courage, first of all, the awareness, and second of all, the courage to start to define those things for yourself rather than feel like those are decided for you. That's, again, it goes back to creativity.
Yeah. I want to put us in the mind of, I can almost guarantee some of the listeners who are thinking, okay, what you're saying sounds good. I love the idea of it. And if you've been around runners, which if you've been a runner for a long time, yep, you know that runners are pretty type A, pretty schedule driven. There's a lot of high anxiety, I don't want to say high maintenance, but high stress people.
Yep.
And they're listening to this thinking, well, that's great. And I do have time to squeeze in my runs, but where's the rest of it going to come from? I have all these obligations. I have kids. I have a job. I have a parent who is in a senior care facility. Where am I supposed to get this time from? What would be your response there? My response would be, you get what you must have, not what you should have. At the intersection of should and must that's the cutting room floor of our lives. And I'm referencing a book by a friend of mine named El Luna, E-L-L-E, Luna, like the moon. Incredible book, intersection of should and must. And, try when you say, I don't have time, I would encourage people who say those words to just make a simple swap out and just say, that's not a priority for me. Yes. Because you get what you must have. If your run is a non-negotiable, but, building the business of your dreams is like, well, I'm going to wait until I, get enough money, or until my daughter's out of college, or until, there's always a laundry list of things. I would encourage you to substitute the phrase instead of I don't have time. It's not a priority for me right now. And that's reality. So if you find yourself saying, yeah, okay, it's true. It's not a priority for me to start my own business, or to, pursue that dream job, or to pursue the sabbatical that I've always wanted to take, or, if you swap out those words and it's true for you, then fine, go on about your day. But when those things are in conflict, you're like, wait a minute, I care about my daughter. Well, then why aren't you going to go to her, her track and field meet? Because it's not a priority for you. It's not that you don't have time. You haven't prioritized it. And I think when those conflicts arise, that gives us an opportunity where it invites us to take a closer look at, are we a victim of our lives or our circumstance, or are we willing to make some painful changes? And, I was just on a different podcast where we were talking about getting up early.
lots of runners that I know are willing to get up early and run in the dark and the wet in the winter because their run is so important to them. And, I would ask them, how much of the other goals that you have in your life are you willing to make a similar sacrifice for? And you start to peel back the onion there, and it just invites you to be aware of how you're truly treating some of these things. And go back to I couch so much of this in our human superpower of creativity, but right now, there's probably, for most people, there's a gap between where you are in life and where you want to be. And that gap might be huge, right? You want to start a business or you want to run a marathon and it's day one of training. And so whether you're 1,000 hours or 10,000 hours, many of you probably know that idea of mastery. It takes 10,000 hours. So whether you're 1,000 hours or 100 hours or 10,000 hours away, or whether you're, 1,000 miles away from training for the marathon, you're only one decision away. And that's the decision to commit. That's the decision to try. And I also find that really empowering, that 10,000 hours or 1,000 miles, on the trail, that sounds like a lot until you realize that it's only the decision to try. That to me is one of the things that I know about the happiest, most successful and fulfilled people, is that they have that ability to encourage themselves or give them the freedom to try or to commit. And nothing happens without either of those two things, right?
Yeah.
Certainly nothing intentional. So.
Well, runners definitely know that. Maria, I'm just going to ask one follow-up and then I want to hear your thoughts here. But okay, so for someone, again, that type A-ness in runners is very much, it can be hard. And I did this for so many years. It was hard to pull back, to give any kind of quiet time that creativity could be allowed to flourish, because it's hard to unpeel that lazy sticker that our society has given to time where you are resting and sitting and being still and quiet. Mm-hmm. So what would you say there in terms of the guilt that, let's say, a mother might feel just going to sit outside for half an hour when she should be doing laundry or cooking or tidying up? What would you say there?
Well, first of all, I think mothers are superheroes. And they are incredible at what they do, and the gifts that they bring to our culture are unlimited. So I want to recognize moms out there. I would just, in response to your question, I would just call attention to a couple of things. Nothing in life can go full out, just nonstop. There's a reason that we have seasons on planet Earth. There's a reason that in summertime the days are long and in wintertime the days are short and dark. There's a reason that professional sports are not year-round, because you can't possibly be in season on all of the time. And if you start to understand that at a most basic level, and you start to look at systems in nature and systems that are successful in the world, they all operate on some sort of a cycle, and the cycle where rest is key. There's a reason that that sleep is not just a nice to have, it is literally required for life. Mm-hmm. And so if you find yourself beating yourself up, as we all do or have at one or many points in our lives, about how much we're doing, or I would encourage you to think about the thing that doesn't rest. The thing that doesn't rest quits. And at the end of the day, would you rather quit parenting and just walk away, or would you rather carve a little bit of time out for yourself? I would also point to the airline instructions when you get on a plane. Do they say, in the event of loss of cabin pressure, the first thing you should do is put your mask on your kid? That's not what they say. And they don't say that for a reason, because if you put your oxygen mask on somebody else, you're not in a position to, first of all, help yourself. And second of all, if you can help yourself, then you can be more effective in helping others. So there's a little bit of counterintuitivity there where, for people who say that they can't quit or can't find the time, just realize that you find the time for things that you deem important. And if you are unfulfilled right now, or there is this gap in your life, a distance between where you are and where you want to be, I would encourage you to take a look at that time. And that's honestly, that's sort of the premise behind my book, Creative Calling, which went, straight to most of the bestseller lists, because it fills a gap in our culture, not just a culture of creativity where we think about art as creativity, but this gap between where we are and where we want to be, and all the cultural and social programming behind it. And, it's not about keeping up with the Joneses or about taking the advice from your career counselor, or we have this powerful intuition in our heart. We think of the rational brain, the thinking brain is so powerful, but the science is pretty clear here. Just the rational brain is very fallible. It's laden with biases. It's actually relatively slow relative to things like intuition and the fact that we can feel in our body if something is right for us or not. And so there's this idea, and this is science. This is not woo. There's like hardcore science to back this up, that says, what if we started paying attention to those things? Or what if we looked at the most happy, successful, fulfilled people? What are some of the characteristics? And the primary characteristic is that they have decided that they are in charge of this one precious life. And then they have made a series of behavioral changes, things like their morning routine, things like, goal setting and planning, and things like rest and recovery. These are the most common attributes to the most successful, happy, and fulfilled people. So, you can either pretend that you're the first person on the planet and try and invent all this stuff yourself, or you can look around, read a little bit, and leverage some of this stuff that other people who've come before us have learned.
Thank you to Picky Buzz for sponsoring this episode of the Running For Real podcast. I've mentioned before, I was over the moon when I heard Picky wanted to work with me. I could not believe it. They are just one of the companies I feel is most aligned with Running For Real, and just kind of a dream company to be working alongside. So Picky Bars has, they started out because they wanted to create these bars. They wanted bars that could be used for performance, but they were also made of real food. They're not full of these horrible ingredients that are hard on digestion. So they wanted it to be something that would sit well on the stomach, but it wasn't, that also was good for performance. And that's important, isn't it, for us as athletes? We know how stressful that can be if you are not getting your nutrition right. It's balanced with that 4:1 ratio of carb, fat, and protein for quick and sustained energy. Gluten-free, dairy-free, soy-free, GMO-free. There's also several vegan options. And best of all, they taste absolutely delicious. So the bars are what they're known for, but they also have performance granola, which I eat most mornings and love. And actually, the oatmeal, the performance oatmeal, I have to say, I've really been off oatmeal the last few years. And when they sent me it, being totally honest, when they sent me the oatmeal, I was like, oh no, what am I going to do with this? I really am not liking oatmeal. But I had some and I really loved it. I had it with whole milk and rather than water as they suggested, but I had it with whole milk, and it was so good that I've had it multiple days in a row now. So it's really, really good oatmeal. And this is coming from someone who's definitely been off oatmeal the last few years. They also have pancake mix and drizzle, which is an almond butter topping with superfood maca that you can put on literally everything. You can get free shipping on all orders over $50. There's a $7 flat rate of shipping otherwise. If you sign up for the Picky Club, which I have signed up for the Picky Club, paying for it myself, which is the heart and soul of the Picky Bars company. It's the best way to get their products. You can save 10, 20 or 30% on top of the money that you are already saving with the code I'm going to give you in just a minute. They are fun. They are just really enjoyable, and you can get an additional 20% off by using code or going to pickyBars.com/Tina, which is going to give you 20% off for all orders over 25 and an additional 20% off your first box of Picky Club membership. That's 20% off at PICKYBARS.com/Tina. Go check it out.
You can either pretend that you're the first person on the planet and try and invent all this stuff yourself, or you can look around, read a little bit, and leverage some of this stuff that other people who've come before us have learned.
So one of my dad actually a few years ago was like, look around you. Every object that surrounds you was invented by somebody who is no smarter than you. Like even like a pen, like look up history of a pen or like whatever, just pick an object and really dive into the history of these things, because a lot of times they were mistakes or a lot of times it was failures that turned into something else, right?
Yeah, that's a great way of talking about creativity. When I give a keynote or something, I'll say, look around you. Like everything in this room, everything was created. And so you think like, what use is creativity? Like everything, the chair you're sitting in, the pen you're holding, the phone that's in your hand, the plane you flew on, the car you drove in on, all of these things. And I think, that's a very easy, tangible way to recognize that everything around it, that nothing happens. The first versions of anything are artists' conception in their mind. And that artist might be an inventor. They might be a computer programmer. They might be a chef. But, that's why expanding the word artist or the definition of creativity is so useful, because it starts to help you see that creativity literally underpins everything and underpins a solution to every problem we will ever know, every humanitarian crisis, the solutions to, climate change and economics. And, it's creativity plus mechanical engineering that came up with the wheel, right? Yeah. So, I mean, if you want to think on the term that I'm thinking, and it's pretty, once I get to that stage, not too many people in the room are doubting. They're like, okay, cool. And then if you can then apply that simple, obvious logic to the human life, I think that's when it gets interesting.
Yeah, and creativity is connecting things that seemingly are completely different, right? So that's why, and I know, Tina, you had David Epstein on the podcast before talking about range, but it's like the more we dab into these unrelated or seemingly unrelated things, whether like you're a runner or an artist or whatever, it's like that's where we'll see the patterns and start to identify things. And it can also be overwhelming.
It's very true. It can be overwhelming. And that's part of why I go back to like, trust your intuition. What were things that made you happy as a kid? What do you want to do right now that you're not doing? And how can you apply a little discipline and some time, whether that's getting up early or staying up late or putting the kids to bed an hour early, or like, I don't know what the thing is, but like all you're doing is making the decision to try. And it's in the trying that you may have initially stumbled into running, or that you may have, uncovered the fact that your current career is not making you happy. And what's the price of the thing that you're doing not making, or how you spend 40, 50, 60 hours a week doing makes you unhappy?
Which is also something you touched on, create before you consume, right?
Yes. Yeah. To be fair, that was from a conversation with my friend Marie Forleo, who's awesome. And this idea is, most people wake up and they get on their phone and they look at all the shit that everybody else is doing and it makes them feel bad, versus like, what if you took that first precious, 60 minutes in the morning where your analytical mind hasn't really kicked in and you've got a little bit of softness, a little open heart, and a little, the brain is actually at a different stage and it thinks a little differently. Then what if you could use that to create something or spend it towards something that you need to invest in yourself, whether that's a gratitude practice or the most important task of the day that's not work related? Like how empowering would that be? And you start to realize that, man, that is a big lever, this idea of creating even the most simple things, before you consume the work of others, before you consume your email, you consume the list of stuff that your boss wants you to do, or, you decide that part of what I need is to go for a run the first thing in the morning. Most people get empowered by that, and just insert, something else alongside running for your morning routine, consuming, the news versus proactively, taking steps to solve a problem or create an opportunity for yourself that you're passionate about.
Yeah, I mean, we're constantly consuming, and that's something that I love about Creative Live, which we can talk about too, is you've created an environment to help creators. So if you're consuming intentionally, I think I watched one of the videos about drones, which is how I learned how to fly on Creative Live, but it's like, I want to create something, which in this case was drones. So I went to consume something that was beneficial for me in that instance. And so I'd love for you to share, for people who don't know what Creative Live is, it's this platform you've created for people with dreams about learning new skills or things that you typically don't learn in school.
For sure. And these things they range from, photography, design, to building businesses and taking care of yourself, wellness, yoga, mindfulness, meditation. So the short version is that Creative Live is the world's largest platform specifically for creators and entrepreneurs. There's, tens of millions of people have used the platform. And, you can subscribe. It's a subscription service for $150. You get access to more than 2,000 classes, like 20,000 hours of stuff taught by, many of the world's best in each of those disciplines that I mentioned. And, entrepreneurship, you've got folks on the platform like, Sir Richard Branson or Brene Brown or Damon John from Shark Tank, or, insert hundreds of other names. In photography, the same thing. In yoga, we've partnered with so many of the best brands and many of the best teachers in the world. And those are just examples. But at the heart of it, it's a platform to pursue skills that can be used to transform your life. And that life can either be work, home, or all of it wrapped up into one. And for you, for example, it was learning how to fly a drone. And for someone else, it might be learning the practice of meditation or mindfulness. And it's when you start to realize that the acquisition of skills, that is a foundation for the change that you want to make in your life or become in the world, and that you can have access to the world's best people for like, $13-14 a month or something. Like, it's hard to think about. For 2 cups of coffee, would you trade access to, all of that? So it's been a 10-year journey. Hundreds of people have built the company. I just happen to be the founder and CEO, but I'd encourage people to check it out. It's a really cool place. I feel like online learning has had its day in the sun here emerging from the pandemic. But, many of us have been digging that ditch for a decade or more. And the fact that, we can transcend the barriers of geography, of access to these world-class thinkers, and largely in costs, you don't have to go to an expensive university in order to learn skills. I think all those things are very exciting. And I hope you had a good experience, Maria, there on Creative Live, learning how to fly your drone.
Yeah, well, I couldn't help but notice the parallels between Creative Live and then what we're creating with Running for Real, because we're both, and Tina, what you've done as well is we simplified the complex, right? And so for Chase, your background was a photographer. And so that's kind of where the evolution of Creative Live started, is taking a complex topic that was really only for professionals and democratizing it essentially. And with Tina, what we're doing is, you're a former professional runner who is still very much a runner, and we're trying to embed that into everyday lives. So that's where I see
there's tons of similarities. And I just like, that is a fantastic paradigm that something like the internet, for example, is, breaks open for us, is access to minds like Tina around the world of running. And whether you do it on Creative Live or on y'all's platform, it doesn't matter. The fact that for anyone who's, listening at home right now, that you have access to Tina, or that you have access to, some of the names that I shared earlier, like that ought to remind you that you have choice, you have authority and authenticity and autonomy toward this, this one precious life. And I would ask the question is, what are you doing with it? And not to make you feel guilty, but when the time is right and you've had enough of the crap that you're doing that's not making you fulfilled, when will you decide to try? It's not even just you've committed to succeeding. You've decided to try, to taste, to put forth some effort, to do something instead of nothing. I think that is that part of the human spirit is something that just fires me up, that we can always, if we can't change our circumstances, we can at least be in charge of changing how we think about our circumstances. And if we can change our circumstances, how powerful that truly is.
Yeah. Chase, if you don't mind entertaining me a little bit, I'd love to just tie in a few things about my past there that I think will relate really well to what you were saying just there. So firstly, you said about if you can't just keep going all the time because you will quit. So Maria mentioned I was a professional runner, had run in world championships for Great Britain. And I ended up quitting the sport literally months after I did that because all the joy had been sucked out. I was going through the motions, had no balance in my life. It was all about the sport. And now I've stepped back. I'm still running. I'm, at a high level for an average runner, but nowhere near where I was. And the joy and the appreciation that I feel to be able to not only have running, but to have other avenues and other creative things that I enjoy makes my life, and yes, having children also is a part of that, just makes my life so much brighter to have not just that one intense, hot burning. And yes, for a season, I had to do that for a while to get to the level I was. But the joy I feel being able to explore all these avenues is just tenfold. And that's where with what we're doing with Running for Real is just trying to help people see that it doesn't have to be about go, 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 but you can step back and you can enjoy other elements of life to really get the most out of it.
Yeah, there's an interesting and subtle distinction to be made there, I think. And if you truly want to be the best in the world, and to be fair, I've had the good fortune of being around so many who are the best in the world at their thing. I was a very high-end photographer for, a couple of decades, working for the world's largest brands, shooting largely sports, action sports. And, I photographed the world's best in so many sports, and surfing and tennis and golf and football, soccer. I mean, just skateboarding, snowboarding. And it's true that the folks who are at the absolute pinnacle, there are largely not a lot of balance there, because the level of commitment required to be the best in the world at anything. I don't know if you've seen the Michael Jordan documentary or any of the race car documentaries. There's all kinds of interesting stories, but what is revealed through those is it's so far from balanced that when you actually, or the Tiger Woods documentary, for example, it's a version of hell. You really get into it. You think, I want to be the best in the world. That's fine. Know if that's truly your thing, great. Just know that those people aren't balanced. Most of them aren't happy. Most of them are fulfilled, but they are very, very much one channel. And for so many of the people who I know who are the world's top performer in any sport or close to it, what I usually come to know, and me having been one of the top commercial photographers in the world, I can say I've dabbled, is it's sort of on the shoulders of that absolute peak performance where life is so much richer, where it is, you can be great at something, but you can have people around you who truly love and support you, with whom you're actually connected, rather than just other athletes of a similar, a similar stature, or where you can't really have a life outside of the thing. And, it sounds like that was your experience on the other side of that hump, when you were able to cultivate a little balance, or a little harmony, I like to say, because most things, don't stay in balance. They, ebb and flow. That's why I like harmony more than balance. But again, we don't have to touch the stove to know it's hot. We can watch other people burn their hands, or we can watch, the world's best at anything. If you truly dissect their lives through documentaries or books or whatever, you realize that it's not really all it's cracked up to be. And I'm not saying that we don't need or want people to be the best in the world. That's incredible and inspiring. But for most of us, for 99.99999% of us, just being a part of a community and connected to a thing that makes you happy, and you can do it at a high level, whether that's golf or running or building a business, that there's so much more wealth. It's sort of like the 80-20 principle, instead of the 99.999 to 0.0001.
Thank you to Insidetracker for sponsoring this episode of the Running for Real podcast. Do you want to run further and faster and recover quicker and easier? Do you need to feel healthier than you've ever felt before? You need to make a change, and that is what Insidetracker is all about. Founded by leading scientists in aging, genetics, and biometric data from MIT, Tufts, and Harvard, Insidetracker is a personalized health and wellness platform like no other. So what is their secret? Well, first, Insidetracker uses its patented algorithm to analyze your body's data and offer you a clearer picture than you've ever had before of what's going on inside you. Then, Insidetracker provides you with concrete, science-backed, trackable action plan for reaching your performance goals and being your healthy best. You want to hear the great part? Insidetracker is offering my listeners 25% off. Yes, 25% off discount to their entire store. All of the options you can look at there. You can go to insidetracker.com/Tina, because change is an inside job.
For most of us, for 99.99999% of us, just being a part of a community and connected to a thing that makes you happy, and you can do it at a high level, whether that's golf or running or building a business, that there's so much more wealth. It's sort of like the 80-20 principle, instead of the 99.999 to 0.0001.
Yeah.
And, I think for both of these stories, there's a certain degree of urgency, right? Because it's like you have a certain amount of time where you're trying to achieve a goal. And sometimes we need a wake-up call, or we encounter a wake-up call. And Chase, for you, that was the avalanche story. I don't know if you wanted to share, but it's like something that happens to you that really spins your life in another direction, and how you cope with that.
Yeah. What you're referencing, for the people who haven't read my book, Creative Calling, is, I mentioned being one of the top commercial photographers in the world and shooting, ads for Nike and Apple and Red Bull and all these amazing brands, going all over the world, traveling hundreds of thousands of miles. Take whatever vision you think it is to be a successful commercial photographer and make it 10 times cooler. And that's basically the life that I got to lead for a long time. And so much of being, at that level is about beating your chest and about, success and triumph and to cut to the chase, I was shooting an ad for Nike up in Alaska, and I was caught in an avalanche, which by every measure is the size of the avalanche, the scope, where, how, all of these details. I should not be alive. And we'll skip the narrative. You can read the book, but the fact that I am, it changed me when I came out the other side of that experience. And I was like, wow, am I doing the thing that makes my heart sing, that I was put on this planet to do? And the argument at a time could have been said yes, because I was, consumed with photography in my career. And at the same time, I recognized that what I truly wanted was to expand the definition, expand what was possible instead of a narrow definition. And, I would say it's probably a little bit analogous to Tina's understanding of, there was me as the professional runner, and now there's me as a human being that wants to experience a wider range of emotions and tap into the side of myself that wants to be a parent or can be a successful, businesswoman, or any of the things, to which we aspire. And one of the things that I came out the other side of that, that second arc, what I like to think of this, the second arc of my career, was this idea that wouldn't it be neat if we didn't have, because so many of those things that experience was brought about by trauma, right? I almost died. And, one of the things that got me into photography was my grandfather died and gave me his cameras. And so there's all these like big, exclamation points in our lives. And I part of why I wrote the book and, why I'm on your show here is to help people understand that wouldn't it be neat if you didn't have to wait for those big catastrophic events in your life to cultivate the change that you want to be or become. And that if you can change your mindset, change a few habits, that the goals that you have are within reach, and they don't have to be the things that it doesn't have to be, death or cancer or something on the other side, like waiting to be married or find the person of your dreams, or, to me, it's very seductive and available to all of us to decide ahead of those times that we want, to do these things. And, you start to look at your bucket list and, why would you not do this thing, or why would you not pursue it? Usually it's fear, and all the best stuff in life is on the other side of fear and on the other side of the unknown. I'm excited to share with your readers, or your listeners rather, that I just launched a shoe with K-Swiss. Michael Jordan has Jordans, and we can think of the tennis stars have their shoes. And so here, as an artist and an entrepreneur, to have a shoe with K-Swiss, it's called the Creator, and there's only 1,000 pairs of them. It's a really cool shoe. You can go to, I'm going to plug it here, okay, guys. It's kswiss.com/Chase Jarvis. That's a bucket list item, and to be invited to do that, and despite having a lot of other things going on, again, you get what you must have. And I said, I'm going to not do these other things, because what a fun, playful, joyful dream to be able to create something from nothing. And for me, a shoe, and to be ostensibly a photographer and entrepreneur and have a shoe was weird and different. And so to me, that's an example of when you are lying on your deathbed, what are you going to wish you did more of? And the science is pretty clear here too. Thousands of people surveyed in this exact predicament have said that they regret living the life that someone else designed for them. They regret not pursuing the things that made them joyful and happy. And I am certainly unwilling to be that person on my deathbed.
Well, first off, congrats about the shoes. That's really cool.
Thank you. It's fun. Yeah.
It's so different than everything else.
It is. It's a really cool, fun design. It's, I'll let people check it out again. kswiss.com/Chase Jarvis, ChaseJarvis. Did 1,000 pair of little capsule there. It's really, really cool. It was a fun project. So check it out.
So because you plugged it, that means you've got to send us 2 of those 1,000.
You got it. Send your shoe sizes to Julie after we have to show here. I'm serious. I'm totally serious.
I was kidding, but
nope,
sure.
You got them. And they're cool. They're really meant to fulfill a really broad swath of, so many shoes are specialized as they ought to be. I wanted something that was both playful and that you could, wear in a bunch of different environments.
Maria, I was telling Chase before you got on here that I was definitely a K-Swiss girl when I was in school.
Yeah.
Did you go
right?
This is way back.
I did not
like
go
plain
through that
white
phase.
ones. Well, you're a bit younger, so maybe you didn't go through that phase.
I want to see pictures, though.
Yeah.
I dig this.
No, it's an amazing legacy brand, and it's fun to be a part of sort of the revival there. Venus Williams is another spokesperson, has a shoe or a couple shoes. Gary Vaynerchuk, another entrepreneur who's a dear friend, has done a shoe with them. And so, you don't have to be a pro skateboarder or a tennis star to have a shoe. It's been a fun,
runners love
fun
shoes
dream.
anyway. So.
Yeah, I know. I hope there's a good crossover with your listeners.
Mm-hmm.
Can
Maria,
I ask one more question?
Of course. Bring it on.
We've been talking about cycles, right? That seems like a big theme. And sometimes beginnings hide themselves in endings. And one of the endings that I learned from reading your book or on Rich's podcast was the story of the Best Camera app, and how, that was kind of like when you hit rock bottom and then you bounce back up kind of story. So I'd love for you to share. Sure.
The story that Maria's inquiring about is, so I was, as many of you now know, I was a long-time successful photographer. And one of the things that defined an early phase of photography was equipment. And so the best, I had $100,000 cameras and, multi $10,000 light setups. And so many of people in an earlier era defined themselves by their equipment or their studio, and you can extrapolate this to other professions, right? By the bling that somebody wears or but as a professional who used that stuff day in and day out, as the concept of cell phones and came out, and those cell phones had cameras. I remember I had a Palm Trio that had a 0.2 megapixel camera, which by today's standards is like, it's literally nothing. It's like and you couldn't even basically see the image. It was so bad.
You were like shaking your hand from side to side.
Yeah, it was like bizarre. And yet for me as a professional at the peak of my career, I ended up finding so much joy in the fact that, it seemed like I never got the moments. I could capture the moment when I was on assignment or when I was crafting the image or, when I had all my fancy gear with them. But 99.9% of life happened not when I had the camera. I, missed my nephew's first goal in his soccer game or, all of those things because my $100,000 camera was in my vault at my studio. And what I found with the mobile camera is that I started capturing those moments because I always had a camera with me. And this is 2000, 6, 7, 8, right? And people, and as a professional, I started sharing the idea that I was taking pictures with these cameras. And the amount of shit that I got was just it was unreal. Just people thinking that, that this, I was a buffoon for caring about mobile photography. And short story too long now, I ended up creating the first photo app that shared images to the internet and shared image to social networks and had its own social network. It was called Best Camera. It was the app of the year on the Apple platform. And I think it was 2009, maybe 2009 or 10. And again, this is just little old me as a photographer developed this thing with a vision in mind that it wasn't about the quality of technology, that photos weren't about megapixels and dynamic range and all all that stuff. It was about stories and about moments. And to fast forward to the punchline, it was the app of the year and it was very successful, millions of downloads. It made me very popular, and a little company called Instagram decided to basically rip off the idea. And Instagram was a lift and stamp copy, and they had $50 million of funding and did a very good job of, 2 years into my year and a half into me having this very successful app of replicating it. And to their credit, they did a fantastic job. But obviously that was, I did not sell Best Camera for $1 billion to Facebook like Instagram did. And so most people I don't know haven't lost out on $1 billion as I have. But the lessons learned there, and then deciding how to respond to that lightweight tragedy, the loss of $1 billion, but more importantly, the ability to sort of, have a flag in the ground, knowing that I played a role in helping transform the earliest worlds around mobile photography that did really matter. And so there was this process of to your point, Marie, in the question, like the end is actually a beginning. And I guess the moral of the story here is, and it's written about in the book, and it's not about cameras or technology, really. It's about our ability to reinvent ourselves in the wake of difficult times, or as really has been a theme of our whole conversation here, to who you were for the past n number of years, months, weeks, whatever. It actually has nothing to do with who you can be or what you can become in the future. All of those stories are just convenient stories that we've told ourselves about our identity, and that we can truly transform, any of the next chapters of our life with intentional, action, with some new mindset and some new habits and goals. In fact, that's the only way that anybody ever has transformed. And so it's a little bit of a story of reinvention and what's possible. So
I would love to tie this back into running to help people resonate with that. So we often talk about runners getting injuries and how crushing and devastating it is in that moment when you've been working so hard, and you must have had an injury at some point.
Many.
So it's devastating when it happens. But I always say to people carefully, or sometimes carefully, that you'll be glad this happened somewhere down the road. This is going to teach you something. You're going to learn something. You're going to grow from this if you take that opportunity to. If you do the exact same thing again and try and see if it'll work and it doesn't, then, maybe you won't learn. But for the most part, we learn, and we're glad that these things happen. Now, it's hard for people to understand that when they're in it. So I'd love for you to just, bring this together and see that even though that must have been, devastating, crushing 10x, if I don't even know a stronger word than that, you still, I'm assuming you are glad that moment happened.
Of course.
And
absolutely.
Just talk to that, because I think for our listeners, it's hard to, if you're talking here about taking a leap of faith, doing something that you love, finding that time for it, it's that fear of what if it goes wrong? And you saying that example there, that's a perfect example of, well, that could happen to me. How hard would that be for me to get through? So, talk to that a little bit.
Oh, I love the question, Tina. I think it's very thoughtful, and there's a lot of wisdom in there. It's like we mostly cannot see the why things happen in the moment, right? And yet, if you can start to think about the world in a little different way, you start to realize that the world is actually happening for you, not to you. And it's very difficult in the moment, and to use my own experience with the Best Camera app. And it was only through losing the thing that millions of people were using, that enabled me to create Creative Live and to hopefully help or transform tens of millions of people's lives. And so there's this force multiplier, and there's a sense of wisdom and experience that you don't get without at least attempting to recognize as soon as you're able that the world is happening for you and not to you. And I don't want to encourage someone to short circuit grief or the pain that happens, sometimes actual physical, real pain, but also the emotional pain. You talked about frustration and anger and sadness with getting injured. And, the only thing we can do wrong with those things is to try to not feel them. That happens for a reason. And so I would encourage everyone to lean into those things, despite how hard and painful, both figuratively and literally, it may be. But it's only in doing that you can move beyond it. Unprocessed childhood trauma cultivates most of the problems in our culture today, because we haven't decided to pay attention to those things and to take the work or the time to heal them properly. And the same is true with an injury. And, you asked if I had been injured. Like, I broke both my ankles twice. I broke 2 arms. I've had, a blown out knee. I can't even count. I have a, full rebuild on my shoulder through a history of sports. And at every time I felt that exact feeling that you described. And I think that's one of the reasons that, the book Creative Calling is relevant. Whether or not you identify as a creator, I think you ought to, or at least hopefully this opens your mind. But at the core of it, there's a very human story that, underpins the roller coaster that we go through, trying to, not even master, but just wrangle this one precious, crazy life that we have. And, it's a Trojan horse. The book is really about, how to live a life that you can be proud of, and one that is fueled with authenticity and authority on you being you. And, it's my hope that people can take, I did my own stunts too. I did my own audio book, if you prefer to listen to the book as opposed to read it. But I think for the runners out there in the world who are listening to this, if you have had an injury and you've been frustrated by it, I think at some point, whether now or in the future, you will be able to recognize that you learned something. If what you learned was patience, or what you learned was something a little more tactical, it's like how to train properly, and it may be difficult to see that in the moment, but life is long. And I would encourage us to start to think of it in those terms. And, how much time are we spending in the moment when reality says that's all we have? Everything we're doing, worrying about what happened yesterday or planning for tomorrow. I can't say that that's wasted, but all life is a series of nows. And if you're always postponing the now and in favor of the past or the future, you're going to be one of those people that ends up on your deathbed. So if you apply that to your injury, what can you be grateful for right now? Can you look around and say, what have I learned? And what is my lesson here? And how can I come back smarter, stronger, maybe with a little bit more empathy and connection, and hopefully with a little more wisdom.
Mm-hmm. And that applies to trying out those things that we were talking about at the beginning of the hour as well. You try something and you're maybe not good at it, but you can learn something and grow and try something else. Sure. Maria, do you want any other final questions you want to ask Chase?
No, I'll just add something that you said, that life is long. I would add, if you know how to live it. And I think the creativity aspect is just a constant reminder that we are the designers of our own life. And there's an Orson Welles quote that I love. It's something like, the enemy of art is the absence of limitations. And I think those limitations, at first glance might seem intense and scary, but in retrospect, they almost always open that door for you to be more creative. So I love Creative Live. I love Creative Calling. And I'm just, I love having these conversations. And for someone like you to share those stories, it's been great.
Oh, I'm so happy to be on the show. As a lifelong runner, I appreciate the work that you all put out in the world and the inspiration. And, this has been somewhat of a philosophical episode, right? So many of the things that we do in life are very tactical, and there's a place for those tactics, but the unexamined life is not worth living. There's all kinds of, I think when we look at limitations, just to add an exclamation point to what you shared, until we saw a 4-minute mile happen.
Yeah.
There was nothing. And then there was a flood of people who were able to run a 4-minute mile. And so when you start to define what's possible for yourself by what everyone else is doing, you're doing yourself a disservice. So I would just encourage you to ask the question, like, if not you, then who? And if not now, then when? Like, what are you going to do to take that first or maybe the next step in that thing that's been scaring the heck out of you, or where you've placed a limitation on yourself that you might be able to transcend.
So good. Thank you so much, Chase. I will put links to everything we talked about today. There's too many to mention.
Thank you for getting this, for all the thoughtful questions. I enjoy sharing. It's been a really crazy time emerging from the pandemic here, and I hope people will check out the links that you share. And It's just a treat to be on the show. Congrats on making such a successful show and such a dent in the world. We enjoy hearing from you guys.
Yeah, thank you. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Chase.
Awesome. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you so much for listening.
Before we end this episode, I just want to take a moment to shout out my podcast editor, Jeremy Nessel, who has done such a wonderful job of looking after my podcast, taking out all the mishaps in the episodes, while still keeping in the vulnerability and the realness and the rawness of the conversation. This is not one of those podcasts where I take out the ums and the ers and the sometimes the delay in words, because I think it's very important to keep that authenticity. We're surrounded by perfected and manicured everything, and I think it's really important that Running for Real stays that way. So thank you to Jeremy for your work. I also want to thank Maria Vargas and Amber Moore, who are also part of my team. They've been a big part of this community and me being able to build this brand. So just want to give them a shout out too. All right, let's get right back to the end of this episode. Well, Maria, you got to interview Chase Jarvis. He's someone you've followed for quite a long time, been learning from for years. How was that?
I learned a lot from this interview. I think the biggest lesson is that creativity is really just interwoven into all that we do. So I think it was just a reminder for all of us to really think back and say, like, are we creating more than we consuming? How are we running or doing whatever we're doing in a more mindful way? So I certainly learned a lot from him.
Yeah, and I think I really appreciated the fact that he did talk about that before you go consume those things, do your email, do social media, respond to messages, you do something first. And I've heard other people saying that. I know Ryan Holiday is someone that you really admire as well, and he talks about that as well. But I think that's a simple way of starting this, right? You can take the first 20 minutes maybe to start with. You're not allowed to pick up your phone for 20 minutes after you wake up. Well, that's like a simple way you can begin with it. So I'm glad he messaged that, and I really hope that our listeners really picked up a lot from that today. So thanks for bringing him to our attention. That was awesome. That
was a great conversation. So thank you, Chase.
Yeah, thank you. All right. So there's links to everything in the show notes. You can go find those at runningforreal.com/Chase-Jarvis. That's runningforreal.com/Chase-Jarvis. And I want to take a moment to just shout out some of the companies that support this podcast, being Tracksmith. You can go get $15 off your order of 75 or more with code TINA15. I want to thank Picky Bars. You can go get 20% off your Picky Club membership, which I have signed up for. And Maria, do you have Picky Club, or you'd like to get Picky Bars?
I don't have Picky Club, but I do buy Picky Bars often.
Okay. Yes, and I knew you loved them as well, because you were as excited as I was. So you can get 20% off your order or an additional bonuses off the Picky Club by going to pickybars.com/Tina. And thank you to Insidetracker for sponsoring this episode and supporting us. You can get 25% off your order by going to insidetracker.com/Tina. And it's a great service. Maria, you're thinking about giving it a try as well, right?
I am. I've heard good things.
Yes. And I know you were texting me about which package you should get. So I'm looking forward to seeing what your numbers come out at and creeping over them. So that sounded really weird, but hopefully that didn't come across that I'm like stalking your health stats.
No.
Because I care, right?
Got to make sure everything's in order.
Exactly. So this was a bonus episode, friends. You will have another episode coming to you on Friday. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you then.
Bye, everyone. Thanks, Tina.